I've noticed something strange about the news. The more of it I consume, the less capable I feel of doing anything about the world. I know more than ever before. I can tell you what's happening in three different countries across right now. What policies just passed, what crisis just started, but I can't actually do anything with that information. And I think, and I don't think I'm alone in this. The news keeps you informed, that's its job. But somewhere along its way, it's make you feel powerless. And I think it's by design, not because journalists are evil or because social media companies hate you, but because of how the whole system is built. The incentives, the economics, the psychology. Once you see it, it explains a lot. Let me start with headlines because that's where most of us actually encounter the news. You're scrolling, you see a headline, maybe you click, maybe you don't. But here's the thing, headlines aren't written to inform you, they are written to stop you from scrolling. That's the only metric that matters. Does it grab attention? Does it make you feel something strong enough to click? So, what works? Fear works. Outrage works. Confusion works. Everything you know about the topic is wrong. Works. Calm, nuanced information doesn't work. Moderate progress made on complex issues doesn't get clicks. Crisis accelerates as experts warn of disaster does. And once you start understanding that headlines are optimized for attention, not accuracy, you start reading them differently. But it goes deeper. Even when you click though the read articles, you often not getting the full picture. You're getting the fast version. Because news operate on speed. The first outlet to report something gets the traffic. The second outlet has to find a new angle. The third outlet is already late. So there's while this constant pressure to publish quickly, which means less time for verification, less time for context, less time for depth. And depth is what actually helps you understand something. Speed gives you what? Speed gives you the what. Depth gives you the why. And why takes time. It takes research, it takes space. And in the system where every outlet is competing for your attention right now, depth loses. You end up with thousands of articles telling you what happened and almost none explaining why it mattered and what it will connects to. Here's where it gets interesting because this creates a weird effect. You consume more news, but you understand less. You know something happened, but you don't know what it means. You see a headline about a policy change, but you don't know who benefits, who loses, or what second order effect you might be. So you feel informed, but you don't feel equipped. And that's gap between information and understanding is where the powerlessness lives. There's also the thing that happens emotionally. Every day you are hit with a new crisis, sometimes multiple crises, and each one is presented as urgent, important, requiring your attention. But you can't actually respond to all of them. You can't fix global political conflicts or a climate disaster or a political scandal. You are just one person. So what happens is you absorb emotional weight of these events without having any outlet for that emotion. Psychologists call this compassion fatigue. You care about too many things and eventually you stop being able to care about any of them. Not because you're already a bad person, but because your emotional capacity has limits and the news doesn't respect those limits. It just keeps delivering more reasons to feel worried, angry, sad, and outraged until you're exhausted. I think this is why so many people oscillate between obsessively following the news and completely avoiding it because both extremes are a response to the same problem. Following everything makes you overwhelmed, avoiding everything makes you feel guilty or ignorant. There's no comfortable middle ground being offered. Now let's talk about who benefits from this because the news isn't just information, it's a product. And like any product, it's designed to maximize engagement. The longer you stay on the site, the more ads you see, the more emotionally activated you are, the more likely you are to share that article, which brings it more to readers, which brings in more ad revenue. Outage is profitable, calm analysis is not profitable. And here's the uncomfortable part. It's not just media companies that benefit, politicians benefit too. Because an emotionally activated public is easier to mobilize. If you are angry, you can direct the anger. If you people are afraid, you can position yourself as the solution. But if you are calm, you think clearly, they start asking harder questions. They start noticing contradiction. They start demanding substance over performance. So there's this weird alliance between media that profits from outrage and political system that benefit from distraction. Neither side is explicitly trying to make you powerless, but the incentives align in a way that produces that result anyway. Let me give you an example. A crisis happens, maybe it's a natural disaster, maybe it's a political scandal. The news covers its intensity or for about a week, every angle, every update, every reaction. You're fully immersed in it, and then suddenly it disappears. Not because it was resolved, but because something new happened, and this cycle starts over. What's the effect of this? You never see the follow through. You never learn what actually happened after the initial outrage. Did policy change? Did the aid arrive? Did anything improve? You don't know because the news has already moved on. So you are left with a vague sense of problems exist but nothing never gets fixed, which reinforces the feeling that your attention doesn't matter. And maybe it doesn't. Because here's the thing about most news, it's about events you have no direct connection to and no ability to influence. A trade negotiation between two countries you have never been to, a policy debate in a legislature you don't vote for, a crisis in a religion you don't can't locate on the map. You're watching it unfold, but you are not participating. You're a spectator. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't care about things happening somewhere else. I'm saying the current model of news consumption doesn't actually give you a productive way to care. It gives you information and emotion with no path for action. And over time, that creates learned helplessness. You start to believe that being informed in the same as being involved, but it's not. There's also the other effect. When you're constantly consuming news about large scale problems, your own life starts to feel less important. Why worry about your personal struggles when there are humanity crises somewhere else? Why focus on local issues when there are global catastrophes? And I think this is another way the news might make you powerless. It trains you to think that only biggest, most dramatic problems deserve attention. But most of change you can't actually create happens at a small scale. In your community, in your relationship, in the choices you make daily. That makes the change. The news doesn't cover the kind of change because it's not dramatic. It's often real than anything you'll read in headline. I started thinking about this few years ago when I realized I was spending hours on week reading about things I couldn't influence while ignoring the things I could. I knew the details of political scandal in the countries I've never visited, but I didn't know my neighbors' names. I could explain complex geopolitical tensions, but I wasn't participating in any local decision making. The news had given me the illusion of engagement without any actual engagement. What shifted for me wasn't cutting out news entirely, it was changing how I consumed it. I stopped trying to follow everything. I stopped feeling obligated to have an opinion on every developing story. I started asking simple questions before clicking on something. Does this information help me understand the world better? Or does it make me feel or does it just make me feel something? Because here's what I noticed. Most news is designed to make you feel something. Anger, fear, validation, outrage. Very little of it is designed to help you think something through. And once I started filtering for the second type, I consumed a lot less but understood a lot more. I also realized that being informed doesn't mean being up to date on every breaking story. It means understanding the patterns, the system, the incentives behind why things happen. And that kind of knowledge doesn't come from scrolling through headlines. It comes from reading longer pieces of books, analyses, and taking time to develop the stuff that doesn't trend. The other thing that helped me was reconnecting information to action. If I read about a problem, I started asking what, if anything, I could do about it. And often the answer was nothing. Which sounds depressing, but it's actually liberating because it means I can let it go. I can acknowledge that the problems exist without absorbing my emotional weight of it. But when the answer was something, even something was small, I'd do it. Donate, sign something, show up somewhere. Not because it would solve the problem, but because it converted passive consumption into active participation. And that's the shift from consumer to participant. Change the entire relationship with news. You stop expecting the news to tell you what to do, what to think, how to feel. You start using it as one input among many. You recognize its limitation, you see the incentives behind it, and you stop letting it dictate your emotional state. Here's the reality: the news will continue to be designed for engagement, not understanding. Headlines will continue to prioritize clicks over clarity. Crisis will continue to be covered intensely and then forgotten. And you will continue to feel powerless if you consume it the way it's designed to be consumed. But you don't have to. You can choose slow sources. You can choose depth over speed. You can choose local over global when it comes to where you invest your energy. You can accept that you don't need to have an opinion on everything. You can recognize that being informed is not the same as being overwhelmed. Goal isn't to tune out completely, it's to tune in selectively, to protect your attention in the same way you'd protect any other limited sources, because your attention is valuable and the news industry knows that. The question is whether you know it or not. I'm curious how you handle this. Do you feel like the news makes you more informed or more anxious? Have you found a way to stay engaged without burning out? Let me know down in the comments. I'd genuinely like to hear how other people's navigate through this.